All right, well, thank you all for having me. Good afternoon. I work in the commercial bank in the Agri-Food Institute. I cover crop economics for fruits and vegetables pretty much on a daily basis. Pretty significant core of my job. California is the national leader in agriculture. We produce over $61 billion in cash receipts per year, 400 crops. Here in the Salinas Valley, predominantly lettuce, vegetable, berry crops. I'm up here quite a bit as I do cover specialty crops for the bank. So all of our customers that I visit, I'm frequenting the Monterey County area. One thing I want to call out, the amount of farm workers in the state as well as our water use. 34 million acre feet of water. If you were to put that into perspective as an analogy, 31 million football fields stacked up with 1 foot of water on top of it. That's how much water our state uses every year to grow crops. It's a pretty significant amount. Here in Monterey County, you don't really have two sources of water from a surface water perspective. You're pretty much on groundwater. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. I think the biggest problem for me with this whole slide, and it's great that we're the agricultural leader, but 1.5% of California's GDP is agriculture. And it's a big problem because we're basically underinvested. Sometimes we don't have as much political support as we need to support the agricultural industry here in the state. And it makes it really hard to plan long-term goals. From a vulnerability standpoint, for me, it's about water scarcity and food security. There's a lot to be said about the Midwest and their farming operations, but if they basically grow crop to export to other countries. They're having a huge issue with soybean. California really does feed America. But there's some threats to that, and I want to talk about that. Specifically on the credit decisioning side, so all of our customers here at the bank, we go through a whole risk assessment process. Without water, it's really hard to finance and get really favorable financing terms, right? So as a bank, we're looking at crop economics, we're looking at water availability, and we're looking at really the markets of how that's going to happen for a customer. When land it doesn't have water available, it puts pressure on those land values. And when those land values come down, that's when people go into land conversion projects because their land isn't worth as much money as it once was. They can't be profitable with their operations, and therefore it turns into something else, whether it's urban encroachment. And I know that we've been talking a lot about that today, so maybe that is something that you guys want. But from my perspective, from an agricultural standpoint, it's about really securing food for America. So let's look at what's happening in California. So these are crop acreage components. If you look at everything in yellow, that's Midwestern crops, very stable. They don't really use a lot of water. They get 40 inches of rain every year. That's not California's case. The one bright spot on here is tree nuts. That's largely the Central Valley. But if you look at everything in red, that's largely what's grown mostly in California and specifically here in Salinas Valley. We've had declining acreage for several years, and it's just this continuing trend of acreage getting smaller and smaller. Some may argue that genetics and technology improves yield and production, and that is true. But really what it boils down to is there's really some challenges with supply. And there's competition out there. And the competition is coming from all sorts of different areas. So we import a significant amount of crop from Mexico, largely avocado, greenhouse grown vegetables. So you've got tomato, you've got all kinds of different vegetables, and as well as the more salad bowl components like lettuce, etc. Canada, largely greenhouse grown operations. And South America is a big fruit importer, a fruit exporter to America. And one of the things that's really interesting about Peru is they are extremely growing and they're making huge investments in agriculture. So the competition is just going to keep rising and rising. And it's not insignificant growth. The only time I've ever seen a chart like this is I was in tech for 20 years before I got working for the bank. And this was a forecast of a startup, like this is how we're going to make our sales, right? We're going to go viral. But that's actually a real chart. That is real imports from Mexico growing at that pace. It's pretty significant. Canada the same way, and Peru is making a significant push on the fruit side. And when you look at our trade balance, right, so we have fresh fruits and vegetables. We are a net importer of all those crops. We cannot grow enough to feed America from that perspective. American consumers have grown to want year-round supply, and they expect to get their fruits and vegetables on a year-round basis in the supermarkets. And California, we basically grow from April to November every year. The crop then transitions from here in the Monterey, Salinas Valley area down to the desert and Yuma, Arizona to continue growing for the 4 months. And then we support from Mexico the rest of the supply. So it's pretty significant. I'm not going to talk about nuts a whole lot because that's all Central Valley. Doesn't really matter for this venue, I guess. So look, how do we level the playing field? For me, we just heard this gentleman talk about reservoir farms. That's a great opportunity. Any land grant school, the incubator that's going in, ag tech, we need that innovation to not only grow jobs here, but to solidify California's dominance in the agricultural space. We can go on and on about a lot of these things. H-2A programs are becoming more and more frequently used. That's foreign immigrant labor here on visa. We are finding as a banking institution, our customers actually are starting to prefer that because those workers are more reliable at times. And I have a chart on that as well. When it comes to water infrastructure, look, our reservoirs only have so much capacity. Monterey County specifically is on groundwater. There's a lot of SGMA regulation. I can spend a whole day talking about one slide, but it's like rocket science. But it is what it is. And at the end of the day, what are we doing to promote sustainability with our groundwater? Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency just approved almost up to a $1.5 billion project, I believe, but it's only 25% funded, and that's to prevent the saltwater intrusion into the aquifer so that we have clean water to not only grow crops but to drink, et cetera, et cetera. One notable thing I want to make about Peru, okay, they've just launched a $24 billion project to extract water out of the Amazon River, take it to the western part of the country so they can grow their agriculture by 29%. This is a project scheduled to be done in 5 years. California only has 1.5% of the GDP. We're underfunded. Sometimes we don't just get the political support. If we tried to do this in California, it would take us 5 years just to do the paperwork, if we're really honest with each other. So that is an example of a country that is really prioritizing agriculture as a predominant component of their GDP. So labor costs in California are really unique, especially here in Monterey County. The chart on the left, that's expenses of an operating component of a farm on a national average. So 10.8% of a company's expenses are going to labor. In California, that's very different. Specialty crops, a lot of hand picking, a lot of different components that go into it. It's almost 31%. So a significant difference when it comes to operating a farming entity here. And these are unique costs of California farming operations. So strawberries and lettuce are two of the highest crops to grow from a labor perspective in all of California. Almost 45%, 40% respectively of their operating cost goes into labor. I don't have much time. I've only got a minute and a half. I'm going to blow through this really quick. H-2A adverse effect wage rate, okay? This is the minimum amount of money that people have to pay for foreign immigrant labor. This has grown significantly in the last 10 years, as has all of our farm labor. So when you look at the average hourly rate, California H-2A labor is $30 an hour. Regular farm labor, just domestic farm labor, I should say, almost $20. But it's really hard to compete when Peru and Mexico and Chile are all under $5 per hour. And that's one of the reasons why some of this competitive component of agriculture comes into play. This is the growth of H-2A visas. California is actually not the number one H-2A user in America. Anybody know who is? What state? Florida. Florida uses more immigrant labor than California, believe it or not. At least foreign visaed immigrant labor, I should say. All right, SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Like I said, I could talk about this slide all day long. Not going to. Here in the Salinas Valley, we essentially have everything that's in red. That's mass subsidence, that's mass depletion of groundwater throughout the state of California. Here we're still trending down, but it's not fully burdensome. It is a problem, And that is one of the reasons why the local GSA, or Groundwater Sustainability Agency, just approved the funding for, the saltwater intrusion component. But if you want to still farm here and be sustainable, it's something that has to be done, and you need to find funding for it, because, as I mentioned, I think only 25% of it is federal funded at the moment. 75% of that project isn't. This is water variable cost. Again, I'm not going to talk about this. All right. Agriculture is never a perfect world. Here's the point I want to make with this slide. California land value keeps rising. The rents that farmers are able to get on their land is right? So at some point, there's going to be a breaking point. How much can our land continue to rise when you can't earn enough rent on that land? Okay? So there's several headwinds here. You've got high interest rates. You've got shifting demand, water availability, all these things that farmers face. And it's a huge component of California's GDP. Actually, it's not. It's a big piece of the GDP, but in percentage-wise, it's not. We need to do better. Fed's in the spotlight. I'm not going to talk about the Fed. All right, row crop land values. Monterey County has some of the highest valuable land in the entire state. So all of the land out here that you see is a significant amount when it comes to value. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per acre. I'm sorry, $100,000 per acre for some of these local coastal berry crops, right? All the way through Salinas Valley. It is going to get lower, but not much. And it's because we produce, and it's so valuable to the farmers. It's so valuable to America from a food security standpoint. Where it's not working right now, bottom right corner here is the Central Valley. So if you look at $100,000 per acre compared to $24,000 per acre, that's because they're depleting the aquifer so much. They're restricted in their water pumping. They're restricted in what they can grow. Their weather isn't as good. You guys have beautiful weather here, right? So they're just limited to what they can grow, and they're seeing declining land values. Again, that hurts the borrowing base. That hurts our ability to lend to those people. All right, COVID and inflation changes, and this is spend behavior. So this is kind of my little economics session. I'm gonna wrap up real quick. I know I'm over time, I'm so sorry. So retail sales trends, okay? This was the most boring graph before COVID. We had COVID, and all of a sudden, the food away from home versus the food at home diverged immensely. Then we came back together, people started coming back, and now all of a sudden, look at how much it costs to go out to eat versus eating at home. So this is real dollars spent, and everybody talks about food inflation, food inflation, food inflation. And it's true, it has inflated. But at the end of the day, the durable good, the perishable good, even if it increases by 10%, it's very insignificant compared to what you would pay on inflation on a new vehicle or a non-durable good, right? So for me, we see this dramatic influx during COVID for eating at home, right? And then all of a sudden the inflation starts to level out. We have started to see it rise back up. Some of that is tariff related, but when you grow domestically, we don't have tariffs. The USMCA is an extraordinarily piece of important legislation. Trump and his first administration set that up, so I would hate to see him go back on it, but it allows us free trade with Mexico. With the exception of tomatoes, I'm not gonna get into that either. That's a whole nother ball of wax. All right, but here's the real key. Coffee is the only thing we can't grow in America. We can grow it in Hawaii, right? What's the most inflated commodity on this chart? Coffee. Significant. You've probably all noticed it if you go to Starbucks. It's pretty expensive if you want a latte now, right? So when you look at fruits and vegetables, that's the purple chart with the X's. We've barely seen any inflation of it. So from a perspective of a farmer, I mean, yeah, it might be, instead of $4 for a bag of lettuce, it might be $4.50, $5 now, but it's not hurting the pocketbook. It's a limited amount of inflation. It's actually the lowest commodity. Produce is the lowest commodity that has experienced inflation out of all of the commodities out there. Beef, eggs, we could talk about that all day long. I'm not going to. But Monterey County, this is what's important, is that produce number. And you guys are doing an excellent job providing America the produce that they need. So what does this all mean? You know, I'm up here, you know, I'm trying to tell you agriculture is extremely important, but it doesn't get a lot of love. And I think we need to get more love from Sacramento. I think our policymakers need to do more to ensure that our food security here in California remains intact. We need to support the innovation at both land-grant universities as well as incubators. You know, California just needs to keep feeding America is really my point. I'm 5 minutes over time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right.